Welcome to HFY Codex. If you love epic sci-fi stories where humanity shines, you're in the right place. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for thrilling HFY adventures. Join us and be part of the journey. The Girl in the Alley. Rain poured over the city, each drop making the streets shine under the dim lights. The air was cold, sharp enough to bite through even the thickest jacket. Most people had gone home early, leaving the roads empty except for the occasional transport ship gliding overhead. Evan walked with his head down, his boots splashing in shallow puddles, his shoulders heavy from a long day at the repair docks. He only wanted one thing: to get home, make a hot drink, and forget the world until morning. But fate had other plans. As he passed a narrow alley between two old brick buildings, something caught his eye. At first, he thought it was just a pile of trash, dark and shapeless in the rain. Then the lightning struck, and for a brief second, the world lit up. That was when he saw her. She was small, sitting against the wall, with her knees pulled tightly to her chest. Her skin was pale, almost glowing in the darkness. Long hair clung to her face, soaked and heavy from the rain. She had no clothes, not even shoes, just bare skin against the freezing ground. And her eyes, wide, strange, and faintly glowing, were not human eyes. Evan stopped, his breath caught in his throat. He had seen aliens before, traders at the docks, workers from far-off colonies, but never one like this. This one was alone, trembling and clearly hurt. Her lips moved slowly, trying to form words, but no sound came out. Her hands shook, violently, each breath leaving her mouth in a white mist. The cold was killing her, and she didn't have much time. Evan took a step closer, his boots crunching on broken glass. Her eyes followed him, full of fear and something else, something like hope. He crouched slightly, trying not to scare her. "Hey," he said softly, his voice nearly lost in the sound of rain. "Can you hear me?" She blinked, but didn't answer. That was when Evan heard it. Footsteps behind him, slow, deliberate, coming closer through the alley's shadows. He turned his head and saw three men stepping into the dim light. Their clothes were torn and dirty, their eyes hard and unfriendly. One of them grinned when he saw Evan. "She's ours, human. Walk away," the man said, his voice rough like gravel. The tallest of the three cracked his knuckles. The sound, sharp in the wet air, Evan glanced back at the girl. She had gone completely still, her glowing eyes wide with terror. Her fingers dug into the wet ground as if trying to hold on to something solid. The rain made her shiver harder, but Evan could tell this was more than cold. This was fear. Evan's mind raced. He could leave, pretend he had never seen her. If he stayed, these men might decide to make him their next problem. But there was something about the way she looked at him, like he was the last chance she had in this world. And deep down, Evan knew he couldn't walk away. He straightened, taking a slow step forward to stand between the men and the girl. The one who had spoken narrowed his eyes, his grin fading. The sound of rain filled the silence, heavy and endless. Lightning flashed again, and for a moment everything was white. In that light, Evan saw her lips move. This time, he could read the word. "Please." The men moved closer, their boots splashing in the puddles. The shortest one pulled something from his pocket, a knife with a dull, jagged blade. Evan's heart pounded in his chest, his mind telling him to run. But his body didn't move. He couldn't. The girl's faint glow reflected off the wet ground, a fragile light in the darkness. If he left her, that light would go out forever. Evan took a deep breath. "I think you should leave," he said, his voice low but steady. The man with the knife laughed. "You think you can stop us?" he asked, stepping forward. Evan's hands curled into fists, the rain running down his face. He had no weapon, no plan. just the certainty that he was not letting them take her. For a long moment, no one moved. The rain hammered on, the air thick. With tension, the girl's eyes never left Evan, as if she was waiting for him to decide her fate. Somewhere deep in the city, a siren wailed, then faded. The three men shifted slightly, circling him like wolves testing prey. Evan's voice came again, firmer this time. "She's not yours," he said. The tallest man sneered. "She's not yours either." Evan didn't reply. He simply stepped back until he was close enough to feel the girls shivering against his leg. And then, without warning, the man with the knife lunged. The fight in the rain. The man with the knife lunged, his boots splashing through the puddle. Evan stepped sideways, the blade cutting through empty air. The attacker stumbled forward, his shoulder hitting the brick wall. Before he could recover, Evan grabbed his arm and shoved him back. The man snarled, his eyes full of anger. The other two moved in quickly, one swinging a rusted pipe, the other raising his fists. Evan backed up, keeping himself between them and the girl. His heart was pounding so loud it almost drowned out the rain. He knew he was outnumbered, but leaving wasn't an option. The girl's faint glow reflected on the wet ground, reminding him what was at stake. The man with the pipe swung, the metal whistling through the air. Evan ducked, the pipe smashing into the wall with a sharp clang. The impact sent chips of brick flying. Evan grabbed the attacker's wrist and twisted, forcing the pipe from his grip. The man howled in pain, his body doubling over. But the third man, the tallest, rushed in from the side. His fist slammed into Evan's jaw, the force making him stumble. Pain shot through Evan's head, but he stayed on his feet. He tasted blood, his vision swimming for a moment. Still, he didn't let himself fall. The man with the knife was already coming again. Evan stepped into the puddle, kicking. Water into the attacker's eyes. The man cursed, wiping at his face. Evan took the chance and swung the pipe he had taken. The metal hit the man's forearm, making him drop the knife with a clatter. The girl flinched at the sound, curling into herself even tighter. Her breath came in sharp, uneven bursts. Evan glanced at her. She was barely holding on. If this fight didn't end soon, she wouldn't survive the cold. That thought lit a fire inside him. The tallest man roared, charging again. Evan swung the pipe, but the man grabbed it mid-air. They struggled for control, their boots slipping on the wet ground. Evan used his knee, driving it hard into the man's stomach. The man groaned and loosened his grip. Evan yanked the pipe free and swung low, hitting the man's leg. The tall man collapsed into the puddle with a splash. The other two, seeing their leader down, hesitated. Their eyes met, a silent message passing between them. Then they turned and ran, disappearing into the darkness. Evan stood there, breathing hard, the rain soaking him through. The pipe felt heavy in his hands now. He let it drop to the ground with a dull thud. Slowly, he turned to the girl. She was still pressed against the wall, her arms around herself. "It's all right," Evan said softly, crouching down. "They're gone." Her glowing eyes lifted to meet his. She didn't speak, but her lips moved again, forming the same word. "Please." Evan's chest tightened. She was shaking harder now, her skin almost blue in the cold. Without thinking, he shrugged off his coat and draped it over her. It was far too big for her small frame, but it covered her completely. She gasped softly. At the sudden warmth, when he reached out a hand, she hesitated. Her gaze flicked toward the mouth of the alley, then back to him. Finally, she placed her trembling fingers in his. Her skin was cold. Far colder than any human's. He pulled her gently to her feet. She could barely stand, her legs weak from the cold and fear. Evan slid an arm under her to steady her. The rain kept falling, washing away the blood on his lip. "We need to get you out of here," he said. She didn't answer, but she didn't let go of his hand either. They stepped out of the alley and into the dim street. Evan glanced over his shoulder, half expecting the men to return. But the shadows were empty. The only sound was the rain and the faint hum of a transport ship somewhere far above. The girl leaned against him, her eyes half closed. Evan knew one thing for certain. If he didn't get her somewhere warm soon, she wouldn't make it through the night. The glow in the dark. The streets were almost empty, rainwater running along the gutters like tiny rivers. Evan kept his arm around the girl, guiding her through the quiet city. She was so light it felt like he could carry her without effort. Every step she took was slow, shaky, as if her legs didn't know how to walk anymore. Her faint glow lit the wet ground under their feet. Evan's mind was a storm of questions. Who was she? Where had she come from? Why was she alone in that alley? But he didn't ask yet. Right now, keeping her alive was more important than answers. He led her toward his apartment building, an old structure on the edge of the trade district. Its halls always smelled faintly of metal and warm oil from the repair shops below. As they stepped inside, the change in temperature made her gasp softly. She clutched his coat tighter around her. Her glowing eyes darted around like she was seeing. A place like this for the first time, they reached his door. Evan unlocked it and pushed it open, guiding her inside. Warm air and the faint scent of coffee greeted them. She stood still just past the doorway, her bare feet leaving wet prints on the floor. Her gaze moved to the light fixtures, the shelves, the small heater in the corner. Evan shut the door behind them. "You can sit," he said, pointing to the couch. She didn't move at first, as if unsure if she was allowed. Then, slowly, she crossed the room and lowered herself onto the seat. Her hair dripped water onto the fabric, darkening it in spots. Evan went to the kitchen. Grabbing a clean towel, he handed it to her. She took it carefully, as though it was something precious. Then she began to dry her hair, each movement slow, almost shy. Evan watched her for a moment, noticing something strange. Her glow was brighter now. It wasn't coming from her skin exactly, but from thin, faint lines that ran along her arms and neck. They pulsed gently, like the rhythm of a heartbeat. When the light brightened, her breathing seemed easier. When it dimmed, she looked weaker. He stepped closer. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She paused, her eyes meeting his. Then she pointed to her side, pulling the coat back just enough to reveal a mark. It wasn't a wound. It was a small silver symbol etched into her skin. It shimmered faintly, like it was made of liquid metal. Evan crouched down to look closer. He didn't recognize the symbol, but something about it felt official, maybe military, maybe something even higher. She noticed his attention and quickly covered it again with the coat, her eyes lowered, almost as if she was ashamed. "It's all right," Evan said quietly. "I'm not here to hurt you." She studied him for a long moment, as if weighing his words. Then, for the first time, she spoke. Her voice was soft, almost musical. "Not safe," she whispered. Her hand tightened on the coat. "They will come." Evan felt a chill. "Who will come?" he asked. She shook her head, her damp hair falling over her face. Then she whispered a word he didn't know, strange and alien. But the way she said it made his chest tighten. It sounded like the name of something dangerous. Before he could ask more, she suddenly leaned forward, her small hand clutching his sleeve. Her eyes locked on his, glowing brighter than before. "You protect?" she asked. Evan didn't have to think. "Yes," he said. Her grip loosened, and for the first time she let out a slow breath. A breath that sounded almost like relief. But outside, in the distance, a low hum began to rise. It was faint at first, like a far-off engine. Then it grew louder, deeper, until the walls seemed to vibrate with it. The girl froze, her glow flickering, her eyes turned to the window with fear. "They are here," she whispered. "The ones who came." The hum outside grew deeper, shaking the glass in the windows. Evan moved quickly to the curtain and pulled it aside. Through the sheets of rain, he saw lights moving in the street. Not the white lights of transport ships, but sharp beams of blue, scanning back and forth. A black vehicle with no markings rolled to a stop, its surface glistening under the rain. 3 tall figures stepped out, their movements precise, almost mechanical. They weren't human. Their armor was smooth and dark, covering them completely. From head to toe, blue lines pulsed across their chests and arms, matching the rhythm of the scanning lights. Each carried a long weapon slung across the front of their body, their heads turned in unison toward Evan's building. Evan's stomach tightened. He didn't need the girl to tell him these were the ones she feared. Behind him, she had gone. Still, her glow dimming to almost nothing, she was holding herself like a cornered animal, her eyes locked on the front door. "They smell me," she whispered, the words trembling. Evan's mind raced. If they came inside, they would find her instantly. The building's front lock wouldn't stop them for even a second. He turned back to her. "We need to go now." She didn't move, so he grabbed his coat from the chair and held out his hand. For a moment, she hesitated. Then she slipped, her small, cold hand into his. Her grip was weak, but it was there. Evan pulled her toward the back of the apartment. The only way out was the old service stairwell. He opened the door, the hinges creaking loudly. The sound made her flinch. "Quiet," she whispered, glancing back toward the living room. Evan knew they didn't have much time. He guided her down the narrow steps, each one groaning under their weight. From above, a loud crash echoed, the sound of a door being kicked in. The girl's breathing quickened. "They are inside," she said, her voice almost too soft to hear. Evan gritted his teeth and kept moving. The stairwell smelled of rust and damp concrete. They reached the ground floor and slipped through a metal door into the alley behind the building. Rain hit them instantly, cold and relentless. Evan pulled his hood up, but the girl's wet hair clung to her face. She was trembling hard again. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, steering her toward the shadowed end of the alley. A sudden flash of blue light swept across the wall beside them. Evan froze, pressing her against the brick. A second later, the beam passed over their hiding spot. It came from a small drone hovering just above the rooftops. Its camera eye glowed bright blue, scanning for movement. Evan's heart pounded. If the drone saw them, the soldiers would be on them in seconds. He waited, barely breathing, until the light shifted away. Then he grabbed her hand and pulled her into the next street. The hum of the vehicle still filled the air, echoing off the wet buildings. They moved fast, weaving between empty market stalls and closed shop doors. Evan didn't know where they were going. He only knew they had to keep moving. Behind them, the sound of heavy footsteps joined the hum. The soldiers were hunting now. The girl stumbled once, nearly falling. Evan caught her and lifted her into his arms without slowing. She gasped softly but didn't protest. Her faint glow returned, pulsing against his chest. It was like carrying a living lantern through the dark. They turned a corner and stopped. 2 more soldiers stood at the far end of the street, their blue lights cutting through the rain. Evan ducked into a side passage, his boots splashing. In deep puddles, the narrow space between the buildings was almost pitch black. Only her glow lit the walls around them. She looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. "You can't save me," she said. Evan shook his head, his jaw set. "Watch me," he replied, and then he pushed deeper into the shadows. The mark on his hand. The passage between the buildings was narrow and damp, the walls close enough to brush his shoulders. Rainwater dripped from broken pipes above, splashing onto his hood. Evan carried the girl deeper into the darkness, her faint glow lighting the way. Behind them, the sounds of the soldiers grew sharper, boots striking wet pavement, metal armor scraping. They were closing in. Evan's mind worked fast, searching for any place to hide. But every turn in the maze of alleys seemed to lead to another dead end. The girl clung to his coat, her eyes darting toward the sound of the hunters. "They follow your scent, too," she whispered. Evan frowned. "My scent?" She didn't answer. just reached out with a trembling hand and touched the back of his right hand. Her fingers brushed his skin, and her glow brightened suddenly. Evan looked down and froze. A faint silver mark was forming there, just like the one on her side, thin lines curling into a strange symbol that shimmered in the dim light. "What is this?" he asked, his voice low but urgent. She swallowed, her gaze fixed on the mark. "They marked you," she said slowly. Evan shook. His head, "When? How?" Her reply made his stomach twist. "When you touched me in the alley." Before he could respond, a blue beam of light swept across the far end of the passage. Evan ducked behind a stack of empty crates, pressing her close against him. The hum of a drone passed overhead, its scanning eye moving back and forth. The girl's voice trembled. "They can find us now. Anywhere." Evan clenched his jaw. The mark wasn't just a symbol, it was a tracker. The soldiers' voices echoed faintly, speaking in a language he didn't understand. The tone was sharp, commanding. Evan peered through a gap in the crates. Two armored figures moved past the opening, scanning each shadow. One of them paused, turning its head toward the crates. Evan's breath stopped. The soldier took a step closer, the blue light spilling over the wet ground. Then, a loud crash sounded from somewhere nearby. The soldier froze, listening. A second crash followed, then the sound of metal hitting the ground. The two soldiers turned and moved toward the noise leaving the passage. Evan let out the breath he'd been holding. "That won't distract them for long," he said. The girl's glow flickered weakly. "They will never stop," she murmured. "Not until we are caught." Evan looked at her, the weight of her words settling over him like the rain. His life had been simple just hours ago. Work, home, nothing else. Now he was marked, hunted, and running through the night with someone he didn't even know. But he did know one thing. He wasn't giving her up. Not to them, not to anyone. He shifted her weight in his arms and moved toward the end of the passage. If the mark was tracking him, they would have to move faster than the hunters. The city wasn't safe anymore. He needed to get her somewhere they couldn't follow, somewhere off the grid. The girl's eyes searched his face. "You have chosen," she said quietly. Evan didn't answer. The truth was already clear in his mind. He wasn't just running to save her. He was running because now their fates were tied. From the street beyond, the hum returned, louder. This time, blue light spilled across the wet bricks. The hunt was far from over. The man in the shadows. The rain fell harder now, turning the streets into silver rivers. Evan kept moving, the girl's faint glow guiding him through the maze of back alleys. The hum of the hunters was never far behind. He could feel the mark on his hand tingling, as if alive. Every step felt heavier, but stopping meant capture. They turned down a narrow lane between two crumbling warehouses. The smell of rust and old oil hung in the air. Evan was about to cross when a voice came from the shadows. "Don't move," it said, low and sharp. Evan froze instantly. From behind a stack of metal barrels, a man stepped forward. He wore a long, dark coat, the hood low over his face. In his hands was a weapon Evan had never seen before. Sleek, black, with a faint orange glow along its side. The stranger's eyes flicked to the girl, then to Evan's hand. "You've been marked," he said flatly. Evan tightened his grip on the girl. "Who are you?" he asked. The man ignored the question, moving closer. "They'll track you until you're dead unless—" He stopped, glancing over his shoulder. "They're close. We can't talk here." Before Evan could protest, the man gestured sharply. "This way." Against his better judgment, Evan followed. The man moved fast, slipping between shadows like he had done it all his life. The girl's eyes stayed on him, her glow dim but steady. They reached a rusted side door in one of the warehouses. The man tapped a small device against the lock and it clicked open. Inside, The air was warmer, smelling faintly of burnt metal. The door shut behind them with a heavy thud. The hum of the hunters became muffled. The warehouse interior was cluttered. Workbenches, crates, and strange machines half covered in cloth. A single dim lamp lit the center. The man finally pulled back his hood, revealing a weathered face with short, graying hair and eyes that had seen too much. "You don't remember me, do you?" he said. Evan frowned. "Should I?" The man smirked faintly. "You worked on my ship once, 3 years ago, Dock 17. Evan blinked, the memory hitting him. "Reyes?" he said slowly. The man nodded. "Good, you do remember." Reyes's gaze dropped back to Evan's marked hand. "They gave you the binding seal," he said, almost to himself. The girl stiffened, her fingers tightening on Evan's arm. "You know it?" she asked. Reyes's eyes flicked to her. "I know too much about it." He set his weapon down on the table and pulled a small scanner from his pocket. "Let me see your hand," he said. Evan hesitated, then held it out. The scanner beeped, softly as Reyes moved it over the glowing lines. "They'll have your location every 5 seconds, he muttered. "Whoever's leading this hunt wants both of you alive." Evan frowned. "Alive? Why?" Reyes's expression darkened. "Because together, you're worth more than either of you alone." The girl lowered her gaze, her voice barely a whisper. "They think he can open it." Evan looked between them, confusion in his eyes. "Open what?" he asked. But before anyone could answer, a sudden boom shook the warehouse. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Reyes grabbed his weapon, his voice sharp. "They found us!" The last stand. The warehouse shook again, the sound of metal groaning under the impact. From outside came the thudding of heavy boots, the hum of engines and the hiss of rain against armor. Reyes moved fast, shoving a crate against the door. "Get to the back," he ordered, his voice sharp. Evan tightened his grip on the girl and moved toward the far wall. Another boom echoed, this one closer. The old metal door bent inward under the force of the soldier's strike. The girl's glow flickered wildly, her breathing fast and shallow. "They won't stop," she whispered. "Not until they take us." Evan glanced at Reyes. "We can't hold them here." Reyes's eyes narrowed. "There's a way out, but it's risky," he said. From beneath a workbench, he pulled a small black device no bigger than a fist. "This will fry the trackers for a short time, but it'll draw every signal in the area to our location before it burns out." Evan understood. It would give them one chance to escape, and one chance only. The door groaned again, a crack opening near the hinge. Through it, a bright blue light cut into the darkness. The shadow of a soldier moved in the gap, weapon ready. Evan's heart pounded. Reyes looked at the girl. "You need to tell him now." She shook her head. "There's no time," she said. Evan's voice rose. "Tell me what?" Her eyes locked on his, glowing brighter than he had ever seen. "You're the key," she whispered. "Only you can open the gate." Before Evan could ask, the door burst inward. 3 armored soldiers stepped through, weapons raised. Reyes fired first, the strange weapon sending a burst of orange light that knocked one soldier back. Evan ducked behind a crate with the girl, the air filled with the sharp smell of burning metal. The girl gripped his marked hand tightly. The lines on his skin flared brighter, almost blinding. Suddenly a vision flashed in his mind. A massive, circular doorway floating in a storm of light. He heard voices, deep and echoing, speaking in the same alien words she had used before. It pulled at him, as if the mark was trying to lead him there. "Evan!" Reyes shouted, tossing him the black device. The soldiers advanced, their blue lights sweeping across the room. Evan caught the device and looked at the girl. Her voice was steady now. "Use it!" He slammed it against the floor, a wave of static. exploded outward. The soldiers staggered, their armor lights flickering. The hum of the trackers in his hand died instantly. Reyes grabbed his arm. "Move!" They ran toward the back wall where a hidden hatch stood open. As they slipped inside, the girl looked back once. Her eyes met the soldiers, and for a moment her glow flared so bright it lit the whole warehouse. Then the hatch slammed, shut behind them, sealing the darkness. In the narrow tunnel, their footsteps echoed. Evan's mind was spinning with the vision of the gate. The girl leaned close, her voice a whisper meant only for him. "They will chase us," she said, "but if we reach the gate first, we can end this." Evan didn't know what waited for them beyond that gate, but he knew one thing. He had chosen her, and there was no turning back. Somewhere above, the storm raged on, and in the dark, the hunt continued.